Good. Okay, good evening, everybody. It is time for the October membership meeting. We got a whole bunch of things we're going to be talking about tonight, but as we always do, let's start off with the introductions, and I'll start here in the front row with Joe and Bill, and then give me the mic back, and I'll walk it around the room.
Joe, K4SAR from Durham.
Bill, KI4REN, also Durham.
Dan, KR4UB, Southwest Orange County.
Paul, N2XF, Butner.
Dave, NA4VY, Nevin.
Ryan, N7RYN, Mebane.
Dave usually knows where he lives, but he just moved, so he wasn't sure where he came from tonight.
Mark, KR4GOI, Roxborough.
I told Mark I would fix his badge next week. I spelled Mark with a K, should be with a C, and I'll fix it for the next meeting. Over here.
John, KM4MDR, Efland.
Tim, KC1TWR, Carborough.
Boyd, KO4GJO, Hillsborough.
Matthew, KQ4ZYW in Mebane, and on Zoom we have Charles, KQ4TNF, Greg, KE8NNJ, Ken, KO4DHJ, Mark, KR3AM, Jerry, KR4NJ, JR, N4JQR, Bob, W4FK, Ron, KO4RON, and John, KR4GOK.
Oh, the camera just went out. Laurie, N1YXU.
Wilson, W4BOH. And since I have the mic, there are free items on the back table. I do not want to take them home.
There's a beautiful bouquet of flowers, a tablecloth. Okay, that's not the one he's talking about. Okay, and I'm Bruce, N1LN. If you could bring up the presentation tonight. Yeah, it takes a little time to get here. Okay, next slide, please. All right, we've got a few topics we're going to talk about tonight. First of all, we've already done check-ins. Opening comments, I want to kind of do an intro about the first item, which is the proposed bylaw update. Then we're going to hear from Boyd about the OCRA Christmas party. 2 months from now, we will be there. So it's a very time-critical update. So Boyd's going to give some information for us, and he's got some stuff over there that he'll explain. And then some closing comments. And then we should be done in plenty of time, so we have the opportunity to bring up any questions or ideas or suggestions from the floor and have just a general roundtable. Or if there is nothing, then we shut down the lights and we go home early. Couple of things about the bylaws. If you remember earlier this year, we did the first bylaw update. I believe that was in March. We said at that time, after we made those changes and brought that to the membership meeting for a review and for a vote, that we would have more to do, but we would do it later in the year because they were more extensive, not necessarily super critical, even though some of them may be more critical than others. But we just didn't want to continue to focus on the bylaws. We wanted to have more fun things to do at our programs. But this will be fun. Laurie's doing the presentation, not me. And Ron on? I don't know if Ron is on. Ron's on. Okay, there he is. Okay, so I won't be talking for the bylaw update. So Ron, and what we decided to do at the board meeting was that Ron and Laurie volunteered to take a look at the most recent updated bylaws from March of 2025 and go through those and find out areas that needed some improvement for clarity, some modifications, maybe of order. There were a few things because the bylaws have been, in effect for 20 plus years and things change. I mean, what stays the same for 20 plus years? So we did that at the board. We had a couple of board meetings where we went through the changes, which generated additional changes. And then we had a final copy that we were happy with from a leadership team perspective. We mailed that out as per a term in the bylaws. In order to request a vote from the general membership, the bylaws need to be provided to the membership at least 2 weeks in advance to give everybody the opportunity to read them and potentially formulate any type of questions they have, send back comments. So I sent them out like 1 or 2 days ahead of the 2-week minimum. Okay, and I mailed them out to the Groups IO reflector. So if you're on Groups IO, you got them that way. Dan also sent them out to the general mailing list. So if you have joined the club and you received any kind of a welcome to the club or updated your dues or anything like that, that's where all of that information goes into the web-based mailing list. So they were sent out 2 different ways. So everybody would have them in advance if indeed you were a club member. If you're not, we'll get to that. Okay. So they came out well over 2 weeks ago. And then about a week ago, I sent out another note with the bylaws attached again, saying just in case you haven't had the opportunity to read them, or if you lost the earlier email, please take the time to read these. And if you have any questions, so we would be ready to understand your questions on this night and not have to dig through, all of the words, the punctuation and et cetera of the bylaws, please send in your comments. So we would understand what your questions or concerns would be. We would potentially change the wording and present that if necessary, or at least be ready to have a discussion. We received no input. So the assumption that we make is that they look pretty good as written and they're acceptable to everybody that at least read them. And I only know at least one person that read them because Joe sent me a note with a question in it and he and I worked that out. So I know there's at least one person that read them. 2, Paul read them. Okay. So I'm sure there's more of you. Okay. But at least I know they got out there because we know that some people read them. So that's kind of where we are. And at the point about the membership, okay, Laurie will get to that and Ron when they're doing the presentation. But when we changed the rules, the bylaws in March, we changed it to approve the bylaw changes because we've got 120 members. There's no way we can expect 120 members to be present at a meeting and try to get a majority of the total quantity of membership. We would never get anything done. So one of the changes that we pushed through in March, which was already approved, and it's in the current bylaws that we are not voting on tonight, it's the ones that already were approved, is the bylaws will be reviewed and approved based on the majority of members in good standing at the meeting where the bylaw vote comes up. Now, members in good attending. First, let's do attending. Everybody in the room is obviously attending. Everybody on Zoom is obviously attending. That's one of the changes that was made in the bylaws because as you would expect, 20 plus years ago, we didn't have Zoom. So if you're attending a meeting 20 plus years ago, the only way to do that was if you're in the room. So we wanted to add in the flexibility of the 21st century on how people attend things. I mean, look at our Saturday nets. We're on Zoom and we're on UHF. Look at our 10-meter net on Monday night. We're on 10 meters and we're on Zoom. Why not for a membership meeting? Why not for members for voting? So that's one of the changes that was made. Okay, members in good standing now. So now you know what a member is and what a majority is. Members in good standing if your dues are paid. So you have to be current on your dues. If you are not current on your dues, you are what's considered not a member in good standing, and therefore you cannot vote. Except for Dave. Hang on, wait a minute. Let me bring the microphone to you because otherwise people want to hear.
What if I just handed over the check right now?
Then you would be paid. Yeah. Depending upon the amount of the check, you could be in better standing. Just kidding. Just kidding. But seriously, understood. I mean, maybe you planned on paying for it tonight. I know yours is paid, so don't worry about it. Yeah. Okay. So, but that is a good question. And that to me is a member in good standing because they are paid. Okay. The vote has not occurred yet. We have not presented the update. Today is, October, whatever it is, 12th, 13th. Okay. So you are paid as of the meeting when we will have the review and the vote. So you are a member in good standing. A little harder for the people on Zoom. Okay. Unless they do PayPal and Ron's checking his PayPal account. Okay.
Just checked it.
That's see, we are real time. You couldn't do that 20 some years ago. Okay. So that's kind of where we are with the bylaws. And I hope everybody kind of understands a little bit of the history and a little bit of the status for tonight and what we're going to be looking at. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Laurie. She's in the room, and between Laurie in the room and Ron is I believe, still in South Carolina, and on the banks of a very nice lake down there. And last time I saw him, he got off the Zoom call because he was going fishing. So don't feel too sorry for Ron tonight for not being here. With that, here is Laurie.
Thank you. And first of all, let me thank my co-conspirator, Ron, and all the other folks from the board, because there has been a lot of input, which I think has been really good. And I hope the product that we've put out for you guys to review is something that you are proud of because it reflects this organization. I know bylaws are not the most exciting thing. I understand that. But given that those of you who are in good standing are going to be voting on this in a few minutes, I just ask for your attention. And I promise that I'm not going to go through this in a very slow pace. I will do my best. If I see anyone nodding off, I may come over and make sure that you're a little bit more awake so you know what you're voting on. But give me and Ron some of your attention and we'll get through this and then we'll hopefully have a vote. So next slide, please. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about some of the changes that we've made since March. There are not many. I am not going to go through the entire document. I would fall asleep doing that. And you guys should have already read it. As Bruce mentioned, we are assuming that everyone who received it has read it. We're getting a little bit of feedback on Zoom. So those who are on Zoom, if you don't mind muting, that would be awesome unless you do have a comment. So I'm just going to give you some of the highlights of what we did and also talk about some of the key changes that we made and why. And again, it will be very, very high level. Then we're going to ask for your input because maybe something that we bring up tonight will spawn a question that you hadn't thought of, and it really is worth chatting about. And we want to make sure that we have those questions answered. Wilson. Yeah, or if somebody just, if somebody has a question as I'm going through and you're on Zoom, just please go ahead and unmute yourself. Just if you don't have a question, if you could mute, there's a little bit of background noise and we're trying to minimize that. All right, we also, if you did not have a chance to read the bylaws and you would like to, as I'm going through this, there are a couple of copies that I'm happy to pass out. You can share or you can look at them. If anybody needs one, they're right up here on the front table. For those on Zoom, you have them in your email if you have not read them. All right, let's go to the next slide. And Ron, obviously, at any point, please jump in. So Bruce mentioned that the bylaws have been around for a long time. And for those of you who didn't know, the date that OCRA was actually incorporated goes back to 1992. That's pretty amazing. And when you look around and you see this organization and you realize that it's been in existence that long and still going strong, that should be something that you should be proud of. So here's an example. When Ron and I first went through and made some changes, our intention was to make them a little easier to read and maybe have a little bit more information without changing the meaning. Example, if you were to look at the March approved, our current bylaws, the first thing that you see is the top paragraph, the approved, these bylaws. I'm not going to read it to you. So these bylaws, it starts, and then it has articles 4, 5, and 6. We wanted to say what's Article 4, what's Article 5, what's Article 6, so you don't have to flip back and forth between the documents. We also wanted to say when the articles of incorporation were actually dated. So that's why we made some of those changes. We wanted to give it a little bit more information and make it more meaningful. There have been a lot of hands on this document over the years, and we were just trying to kind of consolidate and give it a better flow. Next slide, please. Another thing that we did, and this is an example, I'm not going to go through all of the changes that look like this that we made, but if you were to look back at the current bylaws and you look at responsibilities, they're listed in a very run-on sentence paragraph, and it's not very easy to pull out necessarily what the person is responsible for. So if you go to the next slide, what we did is we did not change the intent or the meaning. We made it easier to see, easier to understand the number of responsibilities, and to pinpoint if we had questions or comments and people wanted to propose some changes. One thing that we did do, and I will bring this up, is that item 5 was in a different part of the current bylaws, and it is a responsibility of the president. So we brought that back. So we really went through and we tried to organize information in a better flow, makes better sense. Again, the intention is not changed. If you were to flip back, and I'm not suggesting we do, to the prior slide, you would also see he/she, where we were trying to be politically correct. That is not included here. That gets a little arduous when you're reading or when you're speaking to the bylaws. So Ron did an amazing job rewording a lot so that we did not need to use those kinds of pronouns. It's just easier to read. Next slide. This gives you kind of a cheat sheet of what it was and what it is. And you will notice if you look at the left column, this is the current bylaws, the ones that the document that we approved in March. Let's look over to the right, and I'm going to explain the differences, and then we're going to look at them fairly quickly. So one thing that was kind of interesting when you look at the old bylaws is the wording jumps into directors and then talks about officers, and it really combines the two. So we thought, it might be a better idea if we give an overall definition of what the board of directors are, and then we explain the two parts. So we put in, and I'll come back to the definitions in a minute, but over here, the first area was board of directors. We defined what that includes, the officers and the directors. And then we went through each of those. The officers, there are 5 officers. This is not a quiz, but how many of you can name them? President, vice president, secretary, treasurer, trustee. They are the ones that are elected by the membership as officers. Then we also have board members at large, AKA directors. And based on the bylaws, we need to have between 4 and 8 at any given point. We'll talk about that briefly a little bit later. You'll notice that as we go from the board members at large down, the order has not changed. So again, it was more intent of easy reading, easy understanding, easy flow. We did have a section where we put definitions, and you'll see these in just a minute, of what in good standing and present mean. Bruce has already described in good standing. We'll look at what present means in just a moment. We did that because just like many documents where you see the definition, you then see those words, and it just makes better sense to know what they mean before you get into actually reading or reviewing. So this is a good overview of sort of a flow from the current document to what we're bringing to you today, asking for you to accept and approve, and why. All right, let's go to the next slide. And Ron, at any point, if you want to jump in or if you have anything that you want to add or subtract, please do.
You're doing a beautiful job.
Thank you, co-conspirator. All right, in good standing, important, because folks who are in good standing, members who are in good standing are eligible to vote. And hopefully we will have a vote in just a few moments. So those of you who are current in terms of your dues, thank you, Dave, you will be eligible to vote. Present. If you did read, or if you recall what we did in March, we made sure that people who are present in the meeting at that point included people who are in person or people who are attending on Zoom. We want the definition of present to be a little bit more future looking. What if in 2 years there is a replacement for Zoom and it is much, much better? And that continues to evolve. So we have taken this specific term of Zoom out of the bylaws, and we have replaced it with an approved manner. So Zoom right now is approved. It is a way that we actually conduct the meeting, but maybe in a few years that changes. By taking that word Zoom out, we don't have to come back and purposely update the bylaws. They continue to go in perpetuity. Okay. Next slide, please. All right. I wanted to very quickly show you one of the clauses that we did add, and this was for definition purposes. So you'll remember section 1 in the old was talking about directors. Section 1 in the new says, let's talk about the board. Who's on the board? And the board is made up of the leadership team, the officers. I've already listed those 5. And then the board members at large, the directors. So again, this was definitional. And then if you were to look at the document, the next section, section 2, talks about the officers and all of their responsibilities. Section 3 then talks about the directors. So again, it's intentional in order. You may or may not have noticed that there is a change to the name. In March, we called the trustee a different name, and we will get into that in just a moment. That's an update that you need to be aware of, but this is a section that was added. Next slide, please. Bear with me for a couple of slides, because again, since you are going to be voting on the proposed updates, just want to make sure you're aware of a couple of very specific changes. This is a portion of some of the duties of the officers and specifically the vice president. The change that was made, I am not going to read this to you. I will tell you the intention of it, was that we have taken out the 3rd bullet, and we have replaced it with a much broader, much less confining statement. So the gist of it is that right now, we say that the vice president will act as a liaison to DFMA. And there's rationale behind that, especially when we're having joint activities with other organizations, that the vice president would be linked in and would be the liaison. There's actually a liaison named for DFMA. We did not want to bound the vice president of having to serve in that particular position. And he or she would have the ability to serve in that position or to appoint someone else. So it is not as confining as it was. All right, Ron, I don't know. I know this is one area that you definitely had some specific input to, if there's anything that you wanted to add to that.
No, so on the board of directors, we often have someone who is also happens to be an officer in DFMA. And the way the bylaws were written, that person had no choice but to be the liaison, whether they liked it or not, whether we liked them being that liaison or not. That was what was going to happen because it was written in the bylaws. After saying the vice president is responsible for making sure we have a liaison, it then handcuffed him to assigning any person on the board of directors who happened to be an officer in this other organization. Well, what if we got two people like we're going to have shortly on the board of directors, both of whom are in DFMA? We're going to toss a coin or what? Well, you know, it just got to be, it was too specific and kind of odd. So we said, you know, what if DFMA changes their name? Oh, now we got to go update the bylaws because DFMA changed their name. That was silly. So we just made it very simple here. It says vice president's going to be the liaison or is going to appoint someone else. And it's going to be whoever, you know, the vice president feels is a good person to be the liaison. Just simplifies things.
Thank you, Ron. Any questions about that? All right, next slide. Okay, one other very specific update that was made to the secretary's responsibilities is the striking of the third bullet. You can see manage all club correspondence. When you think about where we are today technology-wise, I can pick on Bruce because I see him doing this a lot as president. He writes a lot of email. Many of you see the email. Many people on the board see the email. So he's really managing his correspondence, so to speak. So we noted that in some areas, treasurer and others, there are wordings that allude to the fact that those officers are managing the work that they do. And this is really not something that and I'll speak to it. I do not manage the club's correspondence. That is something that we share across all the folks who are on the board. One thing, though, that it's important to note is we made sure that in the bylaws, the secretary is an example, the treasurer is an example, that they are responsible for ensuring that whoever takes over their role has documents, has the records. Matthew has graciously stepped in and he is running the show tonight. Thank you very much for that. We've talked a lot about the different information and I've started to, you know, pass that along. And I know that when Ron took over as treasurer, Dan did the same thing. So we made sure that that was verbiage that was included in the secretary. Bill, are you calling me old? I'm kidding you. Absolutely. I think it is awesome that the younger or a younger generation is definitely starting to do that. Thank you, Bill. All right, let's get into, we just have one more update to the officers, and that is, again, I am dragging you backwards to March. You will remember that we went through a lot of discussion about adding in the club station call sign administrator. That is a tongue twister. And even if you use the acronym CSCSA, I'm sorry, that's also a tongue twister. But what has happened, if Dan did a lot of research, and what we found is that the actual activities that this person does for the club is absolutely correct. The title of the person, what that person was going to be called, needed to be changed. From an FCC perspective, a club station call sign administrator is an amateur radio organization that has agreed to provide services for processing applications for club station licensees. And there are a very limited number of those in the country. The term club station license trustee, and we're referencing trustee in the document, is an individual by an amateur radio club, an individual named by an amateur radio club to hold its station license, acting as the responsible party for the club's call sign. And that is what this individual does. So we have changed the name to the updated club station license trustee. The only other thing that we did in that particular area, the repeater code of conduct that we all should have read and abide by. You haven't read it recently, go out to the website because it is out there and it was updated recently. Please make sure you've read it and know it, because as a member, you're actually by default saying, I have read it and I will abide by it. But what we wanted to do was have an evergreen clause in here, so we don't need to go back every single time the code of conduct is updated. And we are saying, you can go and you can look on the website and it will always have most current. Okay. All right. We're getting close, people. All right. This is a new item under the elections. And you will actually see this in action at the November meeting, because there is a nominating committee who has been put together. The nominating committee includes Fred, Ron, and Bruce. They are putting the slate together of the candidates who will be voted on in January. And at the November meeting, that slate will be presented to everyone. So you will know well in advance of who you will be voting on in January. This is the clause. Hopefully you've read it while I've been talking, that the president, with the approval of the board, will establish the nominating committee and they will be responsible for bringing the slate forward. If any of you who have not yet thrown your hat into the ring for the election for 2026 have interest in running, even if there are people who you know are interested in the position that you might be, please, well in advance of the November meeting. In fact, even tonight, it would be good for you to reach out to Bruce here in the room, Ron, Fred, because there are some checks they need to make. In the bylaws, it says anybody who's an officer needs to have a valid FCC license, needs to be a member in good standing. So there's some things that they need to make sure are up to date before you go on the slate. If you would love to be president, please make sure you talk to Bruce tonight. I hope there is just a bunch of folks rushing over to bend his ear after the meeting. All right, next slide, please. This is the last point, I believe. And again, when you think back in March, one of the things that we wanted to do was to alleviate any pain of having directors join or people join the board, because sometimes it can be a little difficult to find people who might be interested in particular positions. So we added item B, and that's saying that, let's say me as secretary, this is the end of my term. Let's pretend it was the first term that I had run and served. I would have the option of re-upping for 2 years or 1 year. For the board of directors, the directors at large, that gets a little squirrely, because the intention is that we have half the group who is current, half the group who is new. So you always have knowledge that is foundational. You will see the slate next month, and we have intentionally been able to build that so that we will not have the issue of having overlap. And in order to make sure that we don't, we are proposing that we do no longer have the option of extending 1 or 2 years. That when the election happens in January, that item B is no longer valid, and that will take care of itself. Okay.
Can
All right.
I add to
Next
that?
slide. I'm sorry, Ron, go ahead.
Can I add to that? So to be clear, after January, if you are going to run for the board of directors, it'll have to be a 2-year seat. In January only, there are a few folks who will run for 1 year. But going forward after that, it's a 2-year term to be a director on the board of directors, an at-large member. The reason we're letting them do that is so that we can get back into the situation where about half the board is experienced people and half the board are new people each year, so that we don't have a bunch of experienced people say, yeah, I'll take 1 year. And then in a particular year, they all drop off at the same time. And we've got nobody experienced left on the board. So we wanted to avoid that. So that's kind of what that's about.
Ron, I hate to tell you, but from the point that you started talking until now, we were having issues on this end with Zoom, so we just got reconnected.
Okay, no problem. I will repeat word for word what I said before, I'm sure. Yeah. So the problem was that we were afraid that we would end up with a board where everyone rolls off at the same time. And so you would have a bunch of people coming onto the board who had no clue what they were doing, which is fine to have up to half the people coming on the board who are brand new, but we need some overlap, some people who have some experience. And so next election, the 2016 election in January, there will be, I believe it's 4 people who are continuing for 1 year. And that gets us lined up so that half the board is being elected on an even year, half the board is being elected on an odd year. The at-large members of the board of directors, I mean, not officers. But after this coming January's election, at-large members' offices will always be 2 years again, and that will keep us on track so that about half are rolling off each year. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Joe has a quick question.
If someone is elected and for whatever reason is not able to complete both years and needs to be replaced, their replacement will just continue serving out that 2-year term? Okay, great.
Yes, that's right. They'll if it was after the first one had finished 12 months, there'll be 12 months remaining. So we will fill that seat until the end of the original term.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, next slide. The slide that is coming up that talks about how long the officers remain in office is only for information. This has not changed. So this is for information, and it's really so that you know, again, kind of a heads up for November, what it is that we're looking at. Next slide. All right, this is the point where, as Ron and I have been talking, questions have come up. Are there any additional questions? Are there any things we didn't cover since you've read this as bedtime story? John.
The club records, that all the correspondence and everything, and how is that accomplished? It's not set forth here. Is that an issue? And secondly, on the issue of voting in good standing, member here in good standing, since that hasn't been passed in the bylaws yet, does that mean members not in good standing can vote tonight?
That was already in the bylaws. It just was it was mentioned in 2 or 3 different places in the bylaws. So what we did is picked it up and put it at the beginning with definitions. And then instead of saying it again and again in various places. So it had already said that you had to be a member in good standing, and that meant someone whose dues were up to date.
And part 1 of your question about what do we do with the documents? We have a lockbox at the bank, and we have all of the original OCRA documents in that box. There are 2 keys to it. I have one. Ron has the other one. It's kind of the same with who can sign the checks. It's the secretary, excuse me, it's the treasurer and the president. And the treasurer and the president have keys to the lockbox. So we could take you down there. You could see all of the stuff from day 1 right up till now, and it's all in that lockbox. And hang on, John's got another question. Let me bring in the mic.
Yeah, the reason for my questions is simply like the extent of documentation, like email traffic that goes back and forth between the content that might help incoming board members or officers understand what was behind the decisions, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 1 year ago, et cetera, in the club. That's one of the ways that you capture some of that knowledge that you're talking about, where if we suddenly lose that knowledge, then, we're in a world of hurt. So I was just curious how we, being an infrastructure guy, how we manage all those kinds of things.
Yeah, we currently do not have any records retention associated with historic email other than what an individual would want to do. Okay, so, okay, Laurie has another comment. Hold on.
In terms of documenting meetings, we have a couple of things. Let's do membership meetings. There are membership meeting minutes that are posted on the OCRA website. If you're not familiar with that, if you go to that website and you look on the left-hand side, you will find meeting minutes. You'll find a hyperlink to membership meetings, and you can go in. That is in addition to, since we've been doing YouTube, they're up as well. And then also on the OCRA website, under those membership meetings, there's a hyperlink to the board meetings. So in that, there's a lot of discussion and decision process making that really, to your point, John, will help folks understand why certain decisions were made. And they go back, I'm not sure how many years at this point.
Your question relates to something I did probably 10 years ago, and you go way back in the founding of the club. Our historical records ended up in different people's homes who were prior officers, and we went through and found all of that. And so far as past minutes, if we found them, they are on that website. There's some that are stored in paper. That's very few. So there has been an effort to go back to the very beginning, and certainly goes back to the charter. The charter and the bylaws is one of the things that's in the safety, the lockbox. And another thing that we've talked about at this meeting that we'll perhaps add at some point in the future is a summary of the bylaws changes and why they were changed.
John, does that answer your question? I think it's a great question. I don't know from a statutory perspective how long. Yeah, and I don't want to throw a number out because I will misquote it, but yeah. Absolutely. Dave. The question was, can an officer, even in a temporary basis, serve as, are you asking about the trustee or a director? Okay, so in a scenario where Dan is.
I've been trustee and treasurer way back in history and trying to get out from under some of those, but the answer is yes.
All right. Are there any questions on Zoom on any topic discussed or not? Something in chat. Oh, right. Those were folks telling us that they were online when we had an issue here. Okay. I don't think it was you, Wilson, at all. All right. I'm not trying to shortcut this. Are there any other questions, comments? Ron, is there anything that you want to add, subtract?
Nope. I say we go to a vote when you're ready.
Okay. If there are no further questions or comments, my hope is that someone will bring a motion that we vote to approve the proposed updated bylaws. Tim, okay, we're gonna go with Tim moved and Paul seconded. All right, and do you want me to call? All right. We are going to do this a little differently because we want to make sure that everyone is heard. So those of you in the room first who are in good standing, if you approve the proposed bylaws as written and presented to you in the emails and also the discussion tonight, please raise your hand. Are there any who are opposed? All right, what we're going to do for Zoom is we're going to kind of pan. So I'm going to ask the same question and I'm just going to ask you to visually raise your hand, which will mean that if you don't have your, or do like Charles did, if you don't have the camera on, you're going to need it. But for everyone on Zoom who is a member in good standing, who approves the bylaws as proposed, please raise your hand or put the little hand icon up. All right, we have well over a majority. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to the board, to everyone with your questions and your input, and we'll consider the proposed bylaws approved.
Thank you all. And I would again like to thank Ron and Laurie for the amount of time that they spent and the level of detail that they actually spent going through the multiple pages and word by word several times to get it to where we are right now. So thank you very much. Let me jump in quickly with an end of the meeting comment since it came up, then I'll turn this over to Boyd. What you heard about the meeting for next month will be the introduction of the slate of officers and board of directors that you will be voting on in January. Now, why are we doing it in November and not in December? Well, December is the Christmas party, and we really don't want to have, you know, a business meeting at the Christmas party talking about who's running for what office. We also want to be able to present the slate of officers early enough so you will be able to see who's running for what office. We have a presentation that Ron put together, Ron being a member of the nominating committee along with myself and with Fred. Fred is off in training someplace this week, Oxcom training. So he's unable to be with us on Zoom or in person. But the three of us had a meeting. We went through the details of who's what where. We factored in the new the board member at large times and how that fits in. So the presentation that you will see at the November meeting will make it extremely clear. Okay. But as Laurie said, if you are interested in running for any office, we need to know before the November meeting because we are going to present the final slate of individuals at that meeting that will be running for those positions. If you come to us in December, we don't have the opportunity to get the documentation updated and out to the membership at large and ensure there's adequate time for the review and the addition of somebody to the slate. We've been saying this for months, so I'm not going to say, gee, I'm sorry we didn't give you enough time. You've had enough time. So if you are interested in being considered for any of the positions, okay, please let us know. And the one right now that does not have anybody running for it is president. So I would really appreciate somebody coming forward because I'm at the end of my 4 years and I am not able to rerun and I want to break anyway. So I'm going to go into the back seat for the next few years and enjoy the meetings from a different chair. Okay, with that, since I talked about why we're not going to do the nominating and the elections at the December meeting, let me turn it over to Boyd so we can hear about the December meeting.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, Christmas party. I'm looking for some volunteers. I'd like to get
Boyd's cutting out on me.
Same here.
Wilson, we can't hear Boyd.
He froze. They probably can't hear us. If only we had a radio there.
Yeah, I see he hasn't moved a millimeter. So, okay.
Yeah, Laurie and I are going through that. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so for the folks on Zoom, I'm looking for two or three people to help get stuff for the party ahead of time and actually get it to the party. If I can divide that up between 3 and 4 people, it'll make that job a whole lot easier. Stuff like cups, tablecloths, napkins, centerpieces, paper towels, ice, stuff like that. We also need some folks that'll show up a little early to the Christmas party to help set up the tables, and get the tablecloths on and centerpieces and make everything look nice and pretty. And then we can just lock the doors and nobody leaves till everything's put away. If you can volunteer, you can check with me tonight. There is a sign up for the Christmas party. It's $10 a person. You should be getting an invitation in your emails this week at some point. If you need to, you can email me at wordwalker3 at gmail.com, and we can get you on a list. And then if you can't get a cash payment when you sign up on a list, then you can mail it in to the
Eventually, because he'll want money. He will for money. Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody's conversation is in the midst of top of Boyd.
All right, we got it. Anyway, yeah. And if anybody needs to mail in a payment for the Christmas party, it's $10 a person. Just mail it into the PO box that's on the website for the club address, and then that'll all go to Ron. Sure. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
I'll also be at the meeting in November so that I can collect cash payments if we need, or give them to Boyd and I'll get them from Boyd.
Okay.
Have you asked for what people are going to be bringing to the,
That's right next to the other things you filled out on the sign-in sheet. Yeah, for those of, whoever's gonna bring, anything as far as potluck items, entree, salad, dessert, or a side, there's a place on the sign-up sheet to let us know what you're bringing, so we can get that somewhat organized.
Okay, very good. Please don't be bashful. If you know what you want to bring, get in touch with Boyd, let him know. I think the food that we have had for the past 3 or 4 years, I'm not sure how many years we've been at this particular location, but I think everybody has enjoyed the evening. I think the food has been absolutely phenomenal. If anybody went away hungry, it's their fault. Certainly not because lack of good food or lack of quantity. So please sign up, and we hope to see a lot of you there. We typically have somewhere's around 50 people, and that's, club members and their guests. And one thing that we try not to do at this meeting, as I said earlier, that we're not going to talk about nominations and elections and voting. We try to make it a guest-friendly party. If your guest doesn't happen to be a ham radio person, okay, we try to make it something that is enjoyable for all. So, and we've been pretty successful. We've had, some spouses attend and are not radioactive, but they seem to get along with everybody and have a good time. So, and Wilson has attended and he wants to tell me about it now.
Regarding spouses, there is going to be a Morse code class before the dinner in case they want to really get involved. We have Randy on Zoom who says it would be nice to have things on email. And I think he means the sign-up list. Is that right, Randy?
Yes,
Well,
that's what I meant. Yes, sorry. Like we did last
okay,
year.
Boyd. Keep the sign-up list on email so everybody can see what's coming.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Not hard.
Okay, we've got a side meeting going on right now. Boyd and Laurie are talking about how Laurie managed that last year. So it'll happen again. They're already talking formats and emails and columns and check boxes and 8x10 color glossy pictures with a what did Alice's restaurant? With some okay, very good. Thank you, Boyd, and thank you all. Okay, next page. Uh-oh, look at that. All right, is there anything, John, hand up, question? Hang on, wait a minute. Doesn't need to be. This is open times.
This past weekend, there was I think the Latour de Femme bike race was using the 442150 repeater as their secondary and using a repeater up in Rougemont, I think, was their primary. I'd heard them in the morning, early, trying to make some contacts as their secondary. They weren't having too much luck from their handhelds up there. But where do we publish those events that have scheduled time on our repeaters? I looked at the website, at the OCRA website. I did not successfully locate where, if we have such a scheduling information like that. The reason I ask is because I threw my call sign out and unfortunately it necessitated their net control to come back on and inform me that and me and all other regular OCRA users that the repeater was in use as their secondary and we should go elsewhere after they invited us to make a call, but just so we don't interfere with them. It was pleasant about it. Don't take my meaning wrong, but that's my question.
The practice has been, first of all, any organization, first of all, Jeremy Lindsay with the RARS group, if you want to find out what public service events are going on in general in the area, that's a good place to go. But the practice has always been when they want to use one of our repeaters, they contact the trustee. And what I've always done, and I've been discussing with Randy, we really need to document this, but basically whoever is going to be our net control that morning of the event is notified that there will be a public service event using our repeaters. And based on Boyd and Randy and myself have had conversations about, you could have many different situations ranging from a very occasional use of the repeater to where they got an outright emergency. And what Randy and contacted Boyd, I believe you were last week's net control, first of all, to announce that event is going on a given repeater. And we talked about kind of come up with some guidelines based on what Boyd is seeing in terms of the urgency of the situation. Here are 3 steps you might want to consider taking. But basically, the net control announces that at the beginning of the net. That's it.
Okay, so I think that's great if you're listening on the net, but I know myself, I misunderstood, I think, the communication. I understood it as a backup repeater. And I was riding around and there was absolutely no activity, and I was on my way over to Charles' house. So I also put my call sign out there, and Charles and I had a brief contact on the repeater. So I think we need to understand what backup means. Is it when the primary fails, then they're going to use it? Or are they going to, hang on, or are they going to use it for a secondary? And I think we need to send out an email or something to the club members, because we only get 10 people or 12 people on a Saturday net. So let me give it back to you.
Well, what we can do, in addition, right now we're sending out Zoom notices. Certainly there's a sandbox or breakfast meeting during the 9:30 net. We send one out for the 10-meter net. And we could certainly start including that information. There has been, and I will say this on this particular net, I had to ask twice to get the information, and this was an very unusual situation that normally never happens. What is going to be your primary repeater? Because my concern was, if the primary repeater was 145.450, that's the same repeater we go to if we have a problem with 150, and it's trying to avoid that situation from happening. But I got that answer the day before the net, which that wasn't good. But so really the question is, do we? No. I didn't get the answer to that question. Randy is okay. Randy, you got any comments you'd like to make about this whole process from your notes?
Yeah, it was a last minute thing, and I don't know how we could let people know unless we, if we send something out on the group, IO groups, I don't know if people would see it. We could let the Saturday morning, the Zoom folks know. But I mean, I think we just need to announce it at the beginning like we did. I don't know any other way when we're sort of last minute knowing like we were this past week.
Charles on Zoom messaged and said, any chance the events could be documented on the groups.io calendar? And I think that's similar to, maybe sending out an email to the groups.io about any events like that are using the repeater.
I don't know whether we use the calendar on Groups.io. So let me just kind of throw a personal opinion out. I've been trying to get people to use Groups.io now. I've been president for 4 years. Okay. Ever try to push a wet noodle up a hill? Doesn't work. Okay. So even though I believe Groups.io is one of our agreed upon methods of communication, every club member has not signed up for it. Okay. Which is why Dan has to send out the notifications, like for the bylaws, to the email distribution associated with when you join the club. Part of the sign-up sheet is your email. If we had everybody in the club agreeing to use one standard method for communication, we would solve John's problem quite easily, maybe, if the people would read the Groups.io. So, maybe there's a Band-Aid, okay? Maybe, when we find out Dan sends a note out to the board. Okay, got a request. So-and-so is going to be using our repeater as backup. Well, I misunderstood what backup was, and maybe Dan never got clarification for what backup was. Well, hold on a minute. But okay, yeah. But maybe we do make the announcement, because most of the time they want the repeater, it's on the weekend. And we start off the weekend at 9:30 Saturday morning with the net, okay? So unless it's a primary, then we have a problem. But if it's backup, we can make that announcement. But I believe we also need to forward it to an email distribution list. I like the calendar, but if we can't get people to read email, we're not going to get people to use the Groups IO calendar. So let me throw it over to Dan.
One problem about the backup, it's some of the questions is almost like that somehow we can define ahead of time whether or not the backup will be used and for what. That's not the nature of an emergency. Either they go into it with a plan to communicate on certain repeaters as primary, and if the repeater coverage is working well, it may be this bike ride is an area that they haven't had a bike ride before. So there may be gaps in coverage. So on the spot, the event net control has to decide when to shift to a backup and start using it. They may not use it at all during an event, or they may have to fall back on it totally because there's an area or region where what they had planned to use as primary just won't work. And of course, the other thing is if you get an outright emergency situation, you're going to use whatever works most expeditiously, period. And that's the nature of a backup. We can't say ahead of time what its use will actually turn out to be.
I have another comment, then I'll pass it over to Wilson for his comment. I am not current with Oxcom. Laurie and I were very active in Texas in Aries, okay? We did a lot of net control activity there, even through the big hurricanes. We were very active during the hurricanes, managing communications. We had a lot of dead time on the nets because you're not talking 100% of the time. It was a standard requirement of net control to make announcements every so often that this repeater is currently being used for X, Y, and Z. Thank you for allowing us to use it, or something appropriate. Maybe that's something that we need to communicate to the organizations. Because John, if you heard somebody saying, you know, we're using this repeater as backup, you know, please use another repeater, that would have been totally different, even though they were polite. But, you know, if we don't know, we can't do anything. So we can do it. You're not, Ron, you're not. Where is it here? Okay. So Randy, whoever net control is on Saturday morning, can make the announcement. We can send out a Groups IO. Oh, that's real easy. All we got to do is change the distribution list to the board members that get the one that we already get, just expand it. But I think we need to communicate to the requesters that they need to, when there's dead time, we don't know they're there, especially when it's called, quote, backup. Wilson?
I've probably seen 50 of these, and I remember fairly strongly that it always says, yes, you can use it, but we may need it too. I think we're making too much of it. We need to remember the manners that our grandmother taught us. If they're on the primary and it's busy, shut up. If you are on the secondary and it's not busy, talk. If they need it, they can tell you. And if we need to write this down on a piece of paper, give it to them, fine. It is not turned off to them. And I know they were not trying to throw John off, but they need to say that. I mean, we need somehow to express what we should know already. It's our repeater. If it's not in use, yeah. If they're using it, it's probably not the best time to get the Walmart list from your wife, okay? Or your significant, whoever it may be, you know, just don't get on there and blab when they may be needing it. It's not like the thing is busy.
Let me make two comments. One of them, I've always felt that having parallel activities on one of the repeaters, especially a regional repeater, is actually good training for an outright emergency. I mean, what if we have a situation like a major hurricane come through? We've got multiple groups out, multiple places. and separate groups needing to use that repeater because it's the only thing that's working for them. I think these public service events kind of give us an opportunity to see what that world might look like. That's the way I've always looked at it. There is one possibility we could do, and I almost hate to bring this up. The repeater does have control tones that, first of all, you all know when that Saturday morning net starts, automatically the repeater changes the courtesy tone on it, and it will say, if you let it go idle, all traffic, please contact net control. Now, to avoid somebody every Saturday morning having to turn that on and turn it off, I programmed that repeater to where it will automatically do it at the start. Typically, our nets only run a half hour. It turns that tone off automatically at 10 o'clock. There is the ability, if net control's willing to get into it, for somebody to turn that tone on, and it will stay on, and basically saying this repeater is being used, all traffic contract net control. But that's a headache that I don't think we want to go there.
I think Wilson has a lot of, as he always does, brings his wisdom to it. Let's use logic and politeness. I think we also need to make sure we do get some information from the user of what backup means, and we need to communicate within our group. And here's John for more comment.
Yeah, just to wrap this up, I'm not trying to start a fight here. I'm just trying to make sure that I can comply with the club's allowing these organizations to use our repeater and not stumble into something like I did this weekend. And so, you know, yeah, I'm happy to go look at the website and find out if someone's using a repeater or a schedule. You know, I usually do on weekends. This 2 weeks in a row where we've had bike races. The week before they were using the 442150 as a backup, a different race, and they were actually using both the primary. They had areas where they didn't have the coverage, and so it's obvious. Once again, no big deal, but I think the idea of asking these guest net controls to periodically announce, you know, while they're using the net, you know, that the net's being used for this race or this event or whatever, would be a good idea. That would at least allow us, because I always listen for a few minutes before I jump on anyway, and which we should all be doing. So anyway, it wasn't a big deal. Not trying to make a big deal out of it, but you know.
Yeah,
and Randy, and the problem is we have had two very recent back-to-back public service events. I agree. And like I say, this last one, I only got late notice, but I had to chase down some information, and that's not the way it ought to be. I felt awkward about it.
Yeah. Well, we definitely did not look at your bringing up this concern tonight as negative. It's positive. And I think it goes along with, you know, part of our repeater code of conduct is we don't want to jump all over people when they're using it for a predetermined period of time for some type of an event. But I think, you know, I do believe this needs to be a, you know, not to make it too formal, okay? Because I also agree with Wilson. There's a lot of logic that can go into this without making it all proceduralized. But there are a couple more very simple steps that we can take. You know, yep, we can send out a broader distribution. Okay, we can send out a broader distribution. I'm not sure what camera is picking me up. Is it that one? Okay. We send out a broader distribution through Groups.io after we get the request and it's approved. That can go out through Groups.io. And I think we should also request clarification what the user's actually asking for. And then if indeed they are using it, to have them make periodic announcements that, you know, they are using this repeater as backup for this event. Thank you. We appreciate your courtesy, or some put it in a can kind of word. We don't want to make it use these 28 words, you know, just something so they regularly repeat. Yeah, Randy, Dan would like me to ask you if you have any further comments, because you look much too comfortable there.
I mean, we announced our backup, and we've got a new backup now that seems to be 100% coverage for most of the folks that come to the net. And sometimes if they've never actually seemed to have come on 442. But if they did, I think we could easily go to our backup, and we've tested that and trained with that, and so that's always a good, as long as they're not going to be using our backup repeater. But yeah, so that's always there for us.
All right, so our next Board of Directors meeting is Wednesday. Thank you, Laurie, for correcting the day. It's Wednesday, October 22nd, because we moved it. We moved the Board of Directors meeting for this month. We had a whole bunch of emails that went around, and everybody said, okay, they're good for that night. So we moved it to Wednesday, October 22nd, and we will bring this up for a discussion and come to some point. John, thank you. Well done. Okay. Any other comments, questions, or from anybody? Anybody on Zoom? Matthew has his hand up. He just wants me to get more steps with my Fitbit.
Hi, everyone. I just want to give a little bit of announcement. I put this out on the Groups IO email, but if you have any free time this coming Saturday, specifically DFMA, but this is open to everyone, that we're helping out the Boy Scouts with Jamboree on the air. The specific time is from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the Westminster Presbyterian Church in Durham. So if anyone wants to volunteer, John has been very nice and has let me know that he'll be able to help as well. But if anyone else wants to volunteer with helping out and just encouraging more younger people to get into the hobby, that'd be great.
Some may remember that I think it was 3 months ago, I was rambling on in a show and tell and mentioned that people used to build transmitters out of old TV sets, which they took apart to get components. And to my great surprise, I got emails saying that really sounds like fun. Why don't we do it? So we started doing it. And now we have about 6 people, 6 or 7. They haven't all been there at the same time, but we have destroyed 4 TV sets and 2 ham rigs, and we have a bottle of components and a jar of nuts and bolts, and we are going to build a transmitter. Now, why am I telling you this? It is not a formal class. It has work periods, and occasionally somebody will ask a question, and that engenders some drawing on the whiteboard and discussion thereof. And people actually seem to be curious about radio. One of the remarks I made was, this is a radio club. Why don't we learn something about radio? And by golly, a few of them are. And it is not exclusive. We meet on Sunday afternoons from 3 to 5, although they're usually there till about 6, in my basement. So if you are inclined to learn something about radio, this is a really great time.
And I heard from some of the folks that they really enjoy it, and it is indeed a good time. One more comment about the November meeting, and we'll go back to Groups IO and other emails that have gone out. Matthew has put together a group survey asking all club members to vote for what type of programs they would be interested in hearing about at the next year and potentially beyond next year, because there were 27 different topics to choose from. We have had a response from approximately 43, 45, remember? We're at 46 responses, which is not huge, but it's almost 50%, and that's not bad for a survey. In November, at the membership meeting, we will be presenting the output of that survey. So you will see what the most interested or most selected topics would be for programs starting off next year. Once we get the items identified, what's the next step going to be? Who's going to do the presentation? So do we have individuals that would raise their hand and say, yeah, hey, I would be willing to do that particular presentation. And, you know, since I'm not going to be president next year, I volunteered on this form that I filled out. I made my selections. And one of the things I put down is working DX as an item that I thought would be interesting to have as a meeting program. It's a big topic on the Monday Night Net. We always hear from, well, I finally worked my 100th country, so now I've got my DXCC. I'm up to 250. I'm using Logbook of the World. I'm using LOTW. Well, I'm making contacts on CW. How do you work split? So we have these conversations on the Monday night 10-meter net. So I raised my hand and said, not only am I interested, and I think it'd be a good club meeting, I would do that program. Okay. I've been working DX forever, and I've got every single DX entity worked and confirmed. So I know how to do it. Okay. So I would be more than happy to do that program. And when we get the presentation next month, if there are topics that you are interested in that maybe aren't there, bring them up. If there are topics that were selected and you want to participate with someone or do the program yourself, raise your hand. This is a membership run club. We need membership to participate to keep the club going. Matthew, any other comments about that? Okay. Okay. Any comments from Zoom? Comments, questions? Okay. Anything else from the room? All right. Well, where are we? We are at 8:51. You have 9 minutes to talk amongst yourselves. Shut off the recording. Thank you very much for coming to the October meeting, and we will either talk to you on the air or we'll see you at the November meeting. Thank you very much.